Assalamualaikum and good afternoon. A bit to all our respected audience. So this online global classroom is organized by the Faculty of Science together with our partner institutions from all over the world. Today we are honored to have Associate Professor Sanjay Swarup. Let me start by introducing Professor Sanjay. Prof. Sanjay is an Associate Professor in the Department of Biological Sciences at the National University of Singapore, NUS. So he is also the Deputy Director of the NUS Environmental Research Institute and the Deputy Research Director at the Singapore Centre for Environmental Life Sciences Engineering, Nanyang Technological University, or NTU. Prof. Sanjay's group has been working on understanding the molecular and metabolic basis of plant microbiome interactions for applications in the environment and agriculture. The team has also developed a research framework to integrate effects of environmental and management stresses with functional responses of environmental and agricultural microbiomes. This has led to science-based environmental solutions for improving management using sustainability as the main driver. A few house rules before we start the session for our respective audience. Please mute your microphone during the session if you have not already been automatically muted. If you have any questions, feel free to ask in the WebEx chat box or the comment section in Facebook Live if you are on Facebook. You can also forward your question to me directly on any of your preferred channels. I will direct the question to Professor Sanjay during the Q&A session later. The link for CPD and the e-certificate registration will be provided near the end of the session in WebEx chat box and Facebook Live comment section. So stay tuned. Before I hand over to Sanjay, let me introduce myself. My name is Firdaus, and I am currently a senior lecturer at the Department of Biosciences, Faculty of Science. I am also a visiting scientist in Prof. Sanjay's group at NUS. So we are streaming from NUS at the moment. All right, Sanjay, over to you.
Okay, so just an audio check. If I can have a thumbs up from my host, so, I'm doing good. So thank you, Firdaus. It's a very good platform that I know now is reaching out to people in these unusual times. So it is my pleasure today to be able to join in your efforts through UTM. What I will do in this session is to start from a global perspective, and then I will build a case that the world is actually the way we are living is affecting the way our agriculture has to be done and to be perceived and planned. In addition, we all know agriculture, especially in the outdoor world, which is the classical and the major supplier of food throughout the world, is under some threats, and these threats are changing. So we will go through that. And then I will give you some bits of some science and technology that we are using along the lines of what Firdaus had mentioned, some of the keywords in the introduction. All right. So I will now attempt to share a presentation and hope it comes through. Okay, so if I can again have a thumbs up on the screen, the first slide. Thank you, Firdaus. All right, so it's quite a mouthful of what I have put in the title. But the brief intro that I had given, it kind of covers what I wanted to say through this title slide, right? So let's look at our coming generations for which we would like to keep producing food. So any innovation, especially for those of us who are in the innovation space, has to align with the demand and the requirement by the future generations, right? That's what our science today has to meet the requirements of tomorrow and time beyond that, right? So what are those top 5 questions is what I've put up here. First, we have to ask about food availability. Where will the producers and consumers be located in future in the world? Second, and I'll try to answer some of these questions as we go along. So hopefully by the end, we'll have some of these questions being at least partially answered. Will weather permit agriculture in its present form? So we know the vulnerabilities due to climate, right? So some portions, even the lands which were very close to or at the sea level, they might not even be available. Some of the mangroves and the adjacent pieces of agricultural lands will also be changing in the way they are being used till now in the past centuries or decades even, right? So the third question we have to ask is then if these are the type of changes that we would see, what type of technologies allow new age of agriculture? So we have to adopt, we have to adapt, and we have to integrate new types of technologies and sciences, right? So that's the third question I've raised. The fourth question I bring up for your consideration is, if these are happening not just in our neighborhood, not in our region, not in our continent, but this is a global issue and aligned with the global classroom theme today, how will foreign policies of people of countries and governing bodies across the world affect import and transportation of food, right? This is an important question. Now that we have gone through this very unusual time in our lifetime, this has happened, and we have heard in all the rhetorics related to COVID-19 and food situation that this kind of availability and threat to food from the production to the consumption areas, all the supply chains were kind of disrupted and tested for their resilience during this unprecedented time, right? So this is the basis or the motivation why I have raised the fourth question. And the fifth question I'm raising is, looking at these broader issues, there would be some specifics for the local governance, right? So will local policies be able to encourage city dwellers into farming? This kind of ties in and loops back to the first question on where will the producers and consumers be located. If those are the questions that are related at the bottom to, again, location of the consumers, then we'll have to figure out that are there other options. And of course, urban farming is one such area or theme that is being worked on worldwide, and we'll talk a little bit more about those. Yeah. So when we look at the producers and consumers, we have to look at human migration. We'll do that. Second question, when we look at the weather, we have to look at impacts of weather change. And I will say just maybe one or two points in that, showing some trends coming up in our part of the world. And then regarding technologies, we have to go beyond the biological and soil sciences and the weather. We have to go beyond these to embrace very clearly driven and science-based development of those apps, big data, and what we are now calling unsupervised methods or machine learning neural network type methods into this bigger umbrella of artificial intelligence. I won't have time to go into these details of these, but those are areas that we are trying to embrace into our biological and soil-based research together with the environment. And then in the fourth area on foreign policies, the impacts of current national protectionist policies, because when going becomes tough, right, we will close our borders. And we have seen for food production that for it to become available for the larger good beyond our country boundaries, it is quite natural for national protectionist policies to come in place. And we have seen this in past even decade, within the decade, that movement from, say, rice exporting countries had been threatened during low production years. And so on the smaller countries which are relying on these, global movement of food, how will things happen in future? And then for the local policies, my sub-point is that impacts of youth aspirations and lifestyles. And this comes back to human migration. So let me jump into that, right? So resources and capital requirements for sustainable agri-based economy and society, we are seeing these are quite linked. So we will have to look at angles on human capital, and that's where who's going to produce the food and where are the consumers, that kind of aspects. Second is about natural resources, and we know that in the new climate scenarios, which will go to several decades to centuries, these changes, the level of or the nature of natural resources, it's changing. Some resources are depleting. Just very quickly, one particular natural resource for agriculture is phosphorus. It is a nutrient for plants. It's called a macronutrient for plants, and that's depleting worldwide. So what do we do about this, right? And so many other cases are there. And then third aspect, the type of capital I'm talking about is the environmental capital. So beyond the natural resources, what is the quality of the environment that is made available both below ground and above ground for the plants and food based on seafood or other culture-based things, right? And finally, financial capital, how much money will drive the commerce of agriculture, and which is related to food as well downstream. So if we look at the way world is living, in the past, if you look at this 1900 area, you have one out of, if you see these, 1 out of 7, so basically 14% of the population was actually urban, the green guys, right? By the time 2008, half of the world was living. So this is almost in our lifetime, right? 2008. We might recollect that year. What were we doing in that year? And I remember I was working in the environment field, going into cities, looking at the environment, and we were becoming very, very thoughtful that environment is now going to be affected by the way human population around the world is now. Half of us are living in these cities. Okay, so in the 2050, so we have crossed 50%. Very soon we'll be in 60 something percent. Currently we are in that range, and by 2050, which is not too far beyond, some of you might be alive, but some of us in the senior years might not be alive by then. But 70% of the world, certainly more than 2/3 of the world, will be living in cities. Okay. So traditional farming, which was being done in the villages and rural areas, and then consumers in the cities, of course, there was a balance. But this balance is now upset. So we need to think about this, right? So there is this concept of rural flight, as you saw in the previous one. Rural flight is happening in Asia. The arrows you are seeing, where are people moving in within China? So until 1983, Chinese government had this Huji or Hukou system, which greatly restricted the ability for this flight. But then since then, things have changed. So approximately 250 million rural migrants now live in cities, leaving 46% of total Chinese population living in leaving 46%, right? So that is the kind of movement. So nearly half of the rural population moved out. And so where is food again going to come from, right? So big questions for all of us. I also have India and China. So rural flight in India, if you see in the 50s, 83% rural. By another, 4 years or so, nearly 47% will be rural. So again, 40 something percent movement of people to the cities. Something again for us to think about. So what are the socioeconomic aspects that are affecting this rural flight? Is about employment. What is driving this? Our employment, marriage, the family structure, multi-generation families living together, that's being broken up, and education is changing in its nature. So no longer, I went to an agricultural school, and majority of my classmates, my undergraduate years in Punjab in India, were from the villages. And so we had a very close connection with the farmlands, farmers' sons, and education. There was a connectivity. And so that brought sustainability in the agricultural and new practices to go back into agri-food system, right? So these changes we should think about, we should embrace these, and be prepared as we go into developing new science and tech-based solutions for agriculture and to keep our growing population in the world fed as these migration patterns are changing. This problem is very acute in Japan, and you can see that a reduction of 40% in the worker population from 1990s has happened. And entire, third-tier cities and villages are now almost empty. The houses are open, you can walk in and out. So you might have seen some of these in the documentaries, at least for me. Two reasons are aging population and youth migration, that you have these empty rural areas. And from next year, which was almost last year back, Japan has, for the first time, allowed foreign workers in two major industries, agriculture and in-home care services. So again, a very national shift in policies are happening. Let's move to the second aspect, climate change. So in climate change, these are just the 4 blocks that I'm talking about here. We have temperature, seasons, glacial melting, and therefore availability of land, especially at sea level, and then rainfall, right? So there are all these that are affecting the way things are moving in the sea, from where a lot of food comes, from the land, and land which is adjoining the oceans, because majority of the world population lives in these, sea abounding or port related old cities. And so population has grown globally according to this. Okay. So major shift happening in the century scale as well. So from the past in rural flight, the current situation, we are now moving to climate change scenarios, which are in these century, decade to century scales. So I zoom into Southeast Asia. So just to remind us on our part of the world, so some of you might be signing in from other parts, but of course, Southeast Asia, tropic kind of dissected almost midway through. And so now, if you look at this transect or this 0-degree line that you are seeing, I'm going to project some of these patterns that are predicted to happen north of it and south of it. Okay. So here, if you follow my cursor from the left, that 0-degree, now we are seeing it as this vertical line. So equator, and then south of it and north of it. And then what we are seeing is how these changes, these are the months on the vertical, and these are the degrees north and south on the horizontal axis. And what we see are these 85-year weather from now projection of precipitation in terms of percent. Okay, so baseline period being 1971 to 2000. So it's about a decade back. And then 30-year data was taken as baseline. And then midterm projections, which are 15 to 45 years from now, they are supposed to be, as we all know, 2 to 4 degrees warmer. But that's the average. But what's going to happen to these guys in just south, where things are going to become hotter, and things which were further north, the cool is going to become colder. Okay, so these are things that we will see as, and this is the color chart in terms of degrees Celsius. And in long term, you will see that this will become even more acute. See, the hotter areas have now started going to even hotter centers, darker red colors here, and more darker blue and more deeper blue colors. That means the extremes will start happening north and south of these. Okay. Similar things now, if you look at the top of the screen, that's dry weather changes, again, percentages. And again, you are seeing that these are now, again, same things, the equator here. And now it is looking flat, equator on the horizontal axis, and you will see that it's becoming more and more hotter. Yeah. And similarly over from midterm, and then those colors are becoming more acute over 2071 to 2100 year from now. I mean, to the year 2071 to 2100. Okay, so overall, whether it is dry weather or it is precipitation, both patterns are becoming more exaggerated, right? This is just a glimpse of where the world is and our future coming in with the filter or the eyes from an agricultural perspective only. Okay, so because of this, because of these changes, what's going to happen? Natural resources will change. Environment and weather is going to change. So first thing is irrigation systems. Second thing is water stress. So changes in rainfall, the type of runoff. So a lot of things would be going off, and now it will follow a different pattern. And so the waters that are upstream, water in the rains, in the river systems that are feeding the agricultural lands for majority of the world is still rain-fed. Majority in Southeast Asian region is from rain-fed agriculture. Okay, so all the food bowl that you see from say rice production in Southeast Asia is all rain-fed. Okay, water quality and supply is going to therefore change, and more damage from high temperature and rains than gain from high CO2. We know that CO2 levels are changing and going up steadily as part of these climate science predictions. So there will be some improvement in carbon capture by the plants. So those gains will improve a little bit, but the downfall or the damage and risks from high temperature and risks from rains is going to put more threat into agriculture. And so as people in the innovation field, what is the future of agri-tech and where should our science and tech go, right? So I've just till now been painting some scenarios and raising some questions. So it starts feeding our mind into how can we as scientists or engineers help in this, even geographers and all the people, all the stakeholders, how should we help in? So should centers, so the big questions are, should centers of food production, therefore, move closer to where the world lives now? Should they be in or near the cities? So last year, we provided an opinion letter to the Indian National Academy of Sciences, where we talked about this peri-urban agriculture and environment. That means it's the surrounding land. Farmers are making more money out of selling their land as the cities are growing. And so those lands which were in agriculture have been consumed by the growth of the cities. But there can be more sustained growth if we can put some sort of decentralized planning within city growth. and then supported by some peri-urban agriculture, which should be done with a lot of care, because food and people, food production and people is juxtaposed, is next to each other. So any pollutants or degrading, harmful degrading chemicals or things, pesticides or whatever, used in one place can easily find its way into the food chain of the humans and other organisms in that growing environment, right? So something for us to think about. So agriculture in future, we cannot be as relaxed about environment as we were in the past. We have to move beyond. And then the second question I've raised, because of this background, should food production increasingly be done indoors because of some of these uncertainties and things, right? As food factories. So if we go indoors, there are many different types, right? So micro farming in and around the house, community gardens, institutional gardens, small scale horticulture based on gardens, small scale commercial livestock and fish farming, small scale specialist producers. So you will see this micro farming, small scale farming. These could actually supplement the classical farming. Of course, that will keep continuing, but these are some of the newer options. Large-scale agri-businesses will transform the way agriculture is going outdoors, and we hopefully can build multifunctional farms even in urban farming, just for the sake of scalability. And these are just things taken up from various publications and things where both people from within Singapore and communities, they are participating in these. Yeah. And some of the benefits of urban farming, these are more talking about the indoor farms, but I will also want to open up our mind for outdoor farms, but in or around these urban environments. Okay, so we'll look at some of these too. So save water by 95%, which will, as we see, become more scarce. And then you can save space. So cities will have, and peri-urban areas will have premium land price. So going vertical is the option. And then pesticide free, I talked about this, why it has to be responsible agriculture as we move along. And then pathogen free, so that the threat to agriculture in these closed environments can be reduced. Okay, so you can have these kind of leaf phenotyping, what you see, the blue and green images, is so that we can capture a lot of data and then process it. Yeah. So some artist impression on the top right and some real photos from an indoor farm. So global pressures as why these urban food systems will be affected, and market forces are shaping the food system. And this is with permission from our Singapore Food Agency, that on the top, what you see are the global pressures. So here, these are the global pressures, resources, weather, and climate, population, affluence in the city. So the expectations are different. Asia was not very salad based, fresh salad, green based diet. Now we see that coming in. We see a lot of high-end fine dining restaurants using live produce with nutraceutical and functional food being introduced in it. So these are changes that are affecting the nature of agriculture. And of course, most of the countries, you have aging population, urbanization, and tech progress, right? And then the market forces, the pull. So the global pressures are the push, and then the pull is in the bottom half. So changing consumer demand, new consumer value drivers, which I was talking about, easy access to information, and you have increasing complexity of sourcing. COVID told us about this big time, and expanding logistics operations. So business side of food has to relook as well. And then we have earlier talked about policies both globally and nationally. So evolving government law, from where and what can come in, criminal liability exposure, and stricter industry standards need to be brought in. I won't go so much into these, but this is another brainstorming session in Singapore where food security issues involved for sustainability, you need focus, balance. Things have to be done across the government because there are many types of stakeholders, and bring them all along, and food production has to be sustainable. So if we look at the income level per capita, so this is from the World Bank, and low to high import dependencies. Countries which have small land mass, they're very, very much in this area. They are import dependent. And at the same time, Singapore and other small countries are also not just in import, but also income level is high. On the other hand, some of the other countries are import dependent, and the income is slowly increasing. It might cross these thresholds very, very soon. So some of these are in what they call resource scarce, emerging producers, import dependents, and mature producers, 4 different categories. One can put them if we categorize them. This is according to the World Bank and FAO stats, okay, as presented by PricewaterhouseCoopers. So looking at what a country which is import dependent, and several of the Southeast Asian countries are in this scenario. So we did a lot of hard look at what and where science and tech can go. We came and thought about green leafy vegetables because they have a requirement of a long cold chain. So in the future, energy consuming status of different food categories, they need to be challenged, and we need to see how those fresh produce can be produced within city environments. And so we focused on leafy vegetables. So if we look at Singapore type scenario, this is relevant to many other countries if you think about the previous chart. So key food items consumed, leafy vegetables is one of them. It provides health protective benefits through the nutrition and nutraceutical properties of leafy vegetables. So that's a very key plus. So the health burden can also come down if we can bring about the quality aspects of leafy vegetables. And then contribution to food security. So this is one reason we have picked leafy vegetables in one of the projects, which I will share shortly. And then we have key challenges in a place like Singapore to improve land, water. How do we improve land? We cannot, because the land pricing is so high. Water, we don't have any rivers and natural systems, so we are totally dependent on rain. And then you have energy and chemical use efficiency. We need to bring it up, right? How to do that? Second challenge is how to improve nutritional content and value proposition in such a scenario. And third is how do we improve the vegetable yield and production level in such a situation where some of these resources, which you see in this top bullet, water, energy, land, and chemical use, has to be done very, very thoughtfully. So what do we do in our program? We have asked a very broad question and taken our mission of the different programs that are going on, is that our solutions have to be eco-inspired, and that's where sustainability is likely going to fit in most closely. We have to be systems based because complex situations like agriculture and environment are very complex, and there are many components that affect. There are many moving parts. So we need to understand these moving parts using holistic approaches, and therefore our thinking, how we observe the system, how do we discover certain interdependencies, how do we discover the key drivers in the process, so that we can get management handles. It all has to be at a system holistic level. And then these have to be integrated. So these are the key words for our inputs: eco-inspired, ecology, and ecosystem-based approaches, system-wide approaches, and then integration. And then the outcome has to be to develop solutions for food resilience, and in this case, agriculture, to improve nutritional security. Okay. only with these approaches can we think about developing solutions which will go on for a long time and will be resilient to risks and threats, right? So the research areas that we embrace broadly are ecology in the soil of microbes and in the plants, both within the roots and above the plants, in the fruits and leaves and such. So therefore, we look at plant-soil relationships, and of course, natural resources like water, air quality, and chemicals, they impact these. Remember, we were talking and highlighting nutritional aspects of plant nutrition and metabolism is something we've been looking at very closely. And then we have to, therefore, be able to use data science and computational biological methods to bring these together. And as we get management handles, we then need to test, validate first in the lab, then in greenhouses, and finally with the farmers. So that's how our research areas are positioned. Our ongoing projects, if we look at this top left blue box, they promote, we are trying to promote crop production. We are trying to promote pest tolerance. And the below ground part, improving soil health and fertility, and then enhance plant nutrition for eventually improving plant performance and agricultural output. Okay. So the two themes we have in our group, they look at, one is on the production side, so lab to farm theme. And then on the right side, you see farm to fork theme. So because we are looking at the food product itself, how to produce it, and when it goes towards consumption, then the microbes and the environment, it can be in the human-based system or slightly before that. And in the production, it can be in the soil or leaves or fruits, as I mentioned, right? So in the top part of this lab to farm, we say that these are for production. And here we have nutrition, growth, and defense as key areas. And what you see as these graphics are some of the parts that our data is producing. Okay. And then integrated solutions. These are for weather, water and fertilizer saving, space saving, energy saving, and time saving. I'm going to show some science-based innovations in these areas. And then waste to resource, I will show you example of that. And then how it is increasing yield and nutritional value. I'm going to show you that as well. So all the scientific results that lead to these. In today's talk, we might not have time to go into the right side, but we are looking a lot into nutritional security, which is part of adding value to the farmers, to the producers. Only then their farms will become more sustainable if they stand on good financial grounds, right? So that security for the economics of agriculture comes from value addition. So as our science will produce value, we should be able to say which practices, which varieties are increasing the nutritional or nutraceutical, the functional food aspects of these agri-food systems. And so the farmers should be able to, if they are able to establish it scientifically, be able to do proper labeling and then of their food products, and therefore they should be able to get more economic value also back to sustain their agriculture, right? So that's one of the bits. So here the three things are parallel to the nutrition, growth, defense. Here we have microbiomes, which are one of the key drivers of these systems. And of course, traditionally in agriculture, plant-based systems are being looked at. So I'm focusing today mainly on plant-based systems. We are also developing for fish-based systems and animal-based systems, but today primarily on plant-based systems. And then nutritional, right? That's the value I was talking about. And then enhancing on the fork side, quality attributes of fresh produce on flavor, aroma, color, texture, and nutraceuticals. So recently we put out how can we approach holistic approaches on organoleptics. So you can read about those. Those are the flavor, aroma, and color-based food systems. Now, if we look at the enabling technologies, how we do things, there are three segments you see in the center. The field, which is the blue or purple. The red is the controlled systems, and we do a lot of computational data science, as I mentioned. So in the top left, field studies will mean going to the farms, the farmers with whom we are collaborating, collect information, then study a lot of things in the lab. So we can look at some volatiles that we are seeing, or signals, discover those. On the bottom left, you see beneficial microbes and ecology inspired data science approaches, the computational biology, which you see in the green part at the bottom of this circle. So these are our enabling technologies. A lot also happens how we generate sequencing data, how of the microbes, of the plant responses, of the analytical chemistry data. So we have a large mass spectrometry lab where we will deconvolute the complex biological mixtures which make up the metabolic outcomes to be resolved into tens of thousands of different biomolecules, mostly the small biomolecules. So we will look at DNA, we will look at RNA, we will look at metabolites both within the plant or in the zone outside the roots, which is known as rhizosphere. And if they come out or are volatilized, then we will look at volatiles. Just a small side information. So we had put out the genome. We were one of the team members to put out the genome of durian, our favorite fruit in this part of the world, and explained its aroma through the volatiles. But back to leafy vegetables, from a fruit to the vegetable. How are we integrating various science and technology options? So here you see we have one sub-project within this leafy vegetable program, where we are looking at the top left, if you see choy-sum here, and then on the top right, kailan. And we are looking at the growth and beneficial nutrients. We are looking at microbiome solutions. And thirdly, we are looking at cost-effective agrotechnologies. So we have therefore been looking specifically at the growth, nutrients, and resilience. This is happening in the facility in the university at National University of Singapore. And at the bottom, you see a view of our farm partner in Singapore. And what we are doing is then integrating at three levels. To understand and optimize microbiome, we have developed some gel from waste, so that's the circular economy part, and LED systems, which is this indoor growth facility, the green and red photo that you see on the top, and then growth, nutrient stress tolerance in greenhouse and field, right? So let's look at some of the interesting things that one can do. How can we shorten the growth period and reduce the water use? Okay, so how can we do this is by understanding how plants are growing and how are they consuming water. So the key statements, key problem statements are given at the top. But interestingly, at the bottom, if you see at the bottom, you have the horizontal axis is the time. And on the vertical axis, you have the amount of plant growth. So we have a laser-based method to do imaging, and you are seeing these images from day 16 to day 32. There is a laser scanner that goes, it's like a LiDAR system for plants growing in pots. And then we can do digital biomass projection, or we can do manual projection. But in either cases, you will see that a lot of time the plant has not even reached its maximal growth, and there are three phases in which these growth is having a growth spurt, just like babies, right? Human babies or animal babies, you see their growth in spurts. Plants also, we discovered, are growing in spurts. So there is one type of slope of this growth curve, second type of this slope of the growth curve, and third type of the slope in the growth curve before it plateaus. So the mature plants are somewhere happening around here, but a lot of time is going on in these growth spurts, right? So how do we use this? We try to give the management practices to reduce each requirement in this growth spurt. And when we do this, we can also look at the water use efficiency. We will see that vegetables, especially leafy vegetables, they use a huge amount of water. So 24 to 35 liters of water per kilogram of leafy vegetable, and it becomes a small serving if we are eating in a small group. So while we are trying to be healthy for human system, it puts a lot of load on a natural resource, being water in this case. So if we have to keep these two things in mind, growth and water use, what are the kinds of things we can do through science and technology? I will leave that thought. I'll come back to that. Second thing is about nutrition. So we are looking at a number of different types of nutrients. Here you will see a chromatogram which is separating each of these peaks is a different type of molecule called, the class is called glucosinolates. These are anti-cancer compounds in this blue box here. And we are able to simultaneously, from the same sample, explain and quantify all these different types of nutrients and nutraceuticals. Below, you see another good set of chemicals for human body are carotenoids, tocopherols, vitamin K1. So there are a number of these that we can separate. And not only that, we can also see them at the different stages. If you're following this cursor, at leaf or adult stage, different types of aliphatic, indolic, or aromatic glucosinolates, different subclasses of this anti-cancer compound, it changes. So when to harvest to provide what type of nutraceutical value, now we are able to advise. And if this gets into the value stamping or value marking system, it can go into the labels, the food label, and therefore farmers should be able to now get a higher value. So that process has to be done properly. And so that's what we are doing with some of the government agencies. Let's talk a little bit about microbiomes. I mentioned that. And so microbes, they can promote crop production, they can impart pest tolerance, and at the bottoms, they can improve soil health. When you don't have these microbes, none of these things are going to happen. And microbes, they are present in tens of thousands, and they were there before plants evolved. So plants and microbes have co-evolved, and that's why plant functions and food that we consume is not sterile. It's full of these microbes. And so these microbes, over the several millions of years, they have been optimizing what this good plant, which brings food for us, what are those functional services. So these are some of the services of microbiomes relevant to agriculture. So how are we addressing them? We are looking, as I mentioned, these three aspects of microbes. We are doing from the greenhouse, we assess the microbes, then we do their sequencing. We look at what are the functions they can provide. We can do some assays in the lab, and then based on that, we are building certain synthetic communities or syncoms, which we can then put it back in the soil so that these functions, the good functions that they can provide, they can now do it to the agriculturally important plants. And so this particular type of integrated approach, which has genomics, culturomics, and metallomics, ionomics, these are the system level data that we put together. So more recently, I won't go into a lot of detail on this, but we are able to now we have put out in the common literature, open access, all the microbes from an urban, very intensively farmed soil from Singapore. And there are about 1,000 genomes that are freely available, and we can start looking at their functions. So in terms of the beneficial chemicals that these microbes produce, here is a small glimpse. Perhaps I come here, that metabolites which are involved, for example, these are secondary metabolites. These are involved in plant microbe interactions, phenylpropanoids, polyketides, and some of the primary metabolites in plants and microbes, carbohydrates, amino acids, amino sugars, where amino acids and sugars are conjugated, quinolines and alkaloids. And so, as I mentioned, one can have these kinds of beneficial chemicals. And these are the type of microbes that we have. We know exactly what their genomes are and what their capacity is to produce what type of either nutrients like nitrogen, sulfur, phosphorus, or some of these secondary metabolites, which will help both in the human and resilience of the plants themselves. How they are doing this is also what we are looking. So, for example, growth promoting hormones, which of these microbes are producing which type of microbes. And some of them, when applied, you can see they are enhancing the growth production as well. For now, I will skip the LED part and I will talk about what we can do if we can model the effect of LED system for the farmers. So what we are doing in the LED, how they are affecting, I won't go too much into that detail, neither go into explaining what this is. This is basically a growth response, a light time biomass model. So you put in how many different types of light, how much time it takes for the light to be shining on the plant system, and what is the resulting biomass. So if I can put it in a predictive model, with 98% accuracy, we can predict that if you put this much type of light for this much time, you can get your harvest, your produce to be harvested in such and such period of time. So why is this important for farmers? Because timing for farmers is extremely important. Again, going back to how can we help farmers, in this case, by putting these technologies of LED systems for the indoor farmers to improve their ability to control their produce. Okay, so we do not want at a low time for the produce to become suddenly available, and then the prices would not be helping them. Similarly, at some times, Hari Raya, Chinese New Year, or the Diwali time in the Southeast Asian or South Asian context, you want these to be produced very quickly. So, so a little bit of energy increase, therefore time of LED and the intensity of LED, you can afford to increase that. And we have another model which converts this into dollars and cents. So the farmers should have tools like these. And of course, people who can develop apps, they can take these models and then develop those, right? So we are doing work on microgreens and what type of chemicals, what stage, and I won't go into detail. I've talked about that for glucosinolates and phenolic compounds, at which stage, which ones are producing more. You can see on the right side, they produce a lot of high quality chemicals at the early stages when they're young plants, and then by the adults, by the time we are traditionally having these food, the value has come down, and therefore we have to consume a lot to get the nutritional and nutraceutical benefit. So we can go to early stages, and then we are promoting microgreen stages for some of these leafy vegetables. So here's an interesting innovation of our integrated program, that we have started making gels, these hydrogels, which can absorb water with a very high degree and then make it slowly available for the plant system. So Here, for every 1 gram of dry gel, it can take by weight 186 grams of water or ml of water. So it has a very huge swelling capacity, right? Let me try to run this video and see if it will run. Just hold on. Okay, so that's the overall swelling of the gel. And next, I will attempt to run a video. I hope it will run. The same gel is now mixed with water, with soil. And you can see on the left, the water has come down very quickly and less water has come out when you have the gel in the soil. So what's the importance of this? The soil can now hold the water more. We have seen from the climate scenarios, there will be a drying period and a lot of flooding in some other times. And so water will become very scarce resource and to be well used of. Also with water, if you have fertilizer or other chemicals, they will go into the groundwater if all the water is rushing down. And the roots very quickly will again remain dry. So you will water it again. So not just adding a lot of water into the soil, but also the runoff into the groundwater will be slowed down if we can add these kinds of water retaining gels. So from where has this gel come? This gel, if you will follow the pointer, is coming from a waste stream of the soybean industry. The waste stream is called okara. It's very rich in various types of amino acids and sugars. And so okara content is 1/3. And this is normally the companies, food companies, they will pay to get rid of this. So we can now show that even fertilizers can, when captured with this gel, will be slowly released. Okay, so I've just shown a video, so I'll skip this. Okay, so now given this scenario, how is it helping water? So by reducing water by 60%, so this is quite a major difference. Without this gel and with this gel, even with 60% less watering, now the plants are doing much better. And these are the smaller stage, they're full of nutrition. So these are very meaningful information for the growers. So there are a number of these innovations that can come. So this is a circular economy, saving of water resource. This is about reducing environmental footprint and reducing natural resource footprint. So in this particular program that I've talked about, we have been trying to enhance the production I've talked about ways that we can reduce inputs, how we are recycling waste from food industry coming into agri input, and then making them resilient because of use of microbes in many of these aspects. So we have looked at some lighting options. We have looked at some nutrient increasing options. We have looked at microbiome utilization options. And we have looked at, food waste to value product in the new soil option, right? That's the commercial name we have given. And these are some of the co-PIs of our team. The lady in the center, she is Fadlina from Singapore Food Agency. We have people from Temasek Life Sciences Lab, from the public safety public safety department in Singapore, in our university, myself from biological sciences, my colleague from chemical engineer, biomedical and chemical engineering for the new soil. He developed the chemistry of these things. And Prof. Low on the plant side, Prof. Zhao from the food science technology, our graduate student who's graduated in the meantime. and some of the ministers, our US president, talking to our young early stage professionals, postdocs, and we are signing MOU with some of the companies, and we have a startup, publications, media coverage, and outreach. So I will end in the last 2 minutes by looking at just some thought points. We won't go through all the points, but just to stir up some of our thinking that if we are thinking about these broad scenarios, so plants, they have to be bred. So my classical training has been in plant genetics and breeding. So we need to think about improving these crops and plants now for feeding 2/3 of the world that lives in cities. Would different way of making these plants, their architecture, their response be needed? And the answer has to be yes. So we have to think about how the plant should look like. For example, indoors, they can be looking slightly different. Their morphological features, so how is the root and some of the microbes that associate with them. So we can do genetic breeding, which has classically been done so that it's acceptable to all governments, all consumers, and then put in all these advanced features. So anatomical features, so how for the water movement, what kind of different types of cell structures and tissues have to be there, and metabolic fields. Remember all the nutrition, nutraceutical part we are talking about. So we can think about in these terms. We have been looking very closely on aromas. So we have put out some of these papers previously on a number of different food in Asia, what kind of aromas they're producing, what kind of chemicals they're producing. So this type of knowledge on the traditional food in our part of the world, nobody from outside is going to come. It is us who has to take these on. So we have to build collaborations. We have to work together and then start identifying what are the aromas, chemicals, and so on. Yeah. So I think this is perhaps my second last slide. Again, we need to zoom out. We talked about different types of capitals as part of sustainable development goals, mainly from agri-based systems, financial capital. Much of the urban farms will be on high value land. Peri-urban land is also going to be high. So there will be investment in the financial side needed. So both governments, NGOs funding these, and of course, largely by the commercial sector, that has to come. Human capital. So who is going to drive agriculture in future? So we need to get the young people excited to be in this high-tech agriculture, transform it in a way that it can keep the younger generations also excited about it. And so we'll have sustainable production by recovery of the human capital with the coming decades, right? I've talked about natural resources, water, dryness, plant performance. We'll have to think in those terms. Use natural resources, also microbes as a natural resource, and we can use it to offset some of the chemicals that need to be there. And so environmental capital will become healthy as well. And since humans and agriculture, especially in the fresh produce, if it can be done closely, then close to each other, then all the energy and resources needed to bring from far off agricultural lands to the cities, now that can be that energy burden can be reduced as well, right? So having gone through these aspects of agriculture and the role of microbes and technologies of all types and gels and data, here are some thought points to leave with. So value creation. So 4 things that I'll say here. Value creation right now for the farmers, and we have to play a role in identifying those values and passing them on to the farmers is not a choice, it's a necessity, because things are going to become more tough for the farmers. So we want them still to be economically viable and excited. So value we have to create. Second thing, we being in an innovation space have to think about, when we innovate, difficult to navigate the innovation space. We cannot be masters of all those areas I was talking about. So that's why I took time to name the expertise of each area. We need to come together. We need to share the knowledge. So this kind of platform is very important and critical. And I'm happy to be part of this sharing series. Third is local challenges are unique. So we had talked about, right, Southeast Asia and things happening around the equator. So innovation targets have to be unique as well. And so I talked about some of these coming from local food industry. So soybean industry might not be that big in some of the other countries. So we have to think about what else can be harvested from there, right? And then build a resource recovery strategy. So innovation targets also are unique in the local scenarios. And lastly, the differentiation keywords. This is the very last thing if nothing else, take these key points, collaborate, innovate, and incorporate. So unless we do not collaborate, we will not have solutions for complex scenarios. Unless we innovate, we won't have solutions for the upcoming challenges. And lastly, if we don't incorporate these into the practices for the farmers, all this will remain in the journals and publications and not go out. So the stakeholder adoption has to be kept in mind. That is the incorporate, right? So in our work, we have academia, industry, and government partners, and these are being taken up by some of the stakeholders. So we are quite happy and grateful that some of this science to adoption, and while working with the government agencies, we are also talking about providing the scientific information for them to consider in their policies. So I will end here. I've been 6 minutes over.
All right. Thank you, Sanjay. So we have about 15 minutes for questions. I have some questions sent publicly and privately. But before that, I would like to say to everyone that hopefully all of you can see that Prof. Sanjay's research in agricultural technologies is a very holistic approach. You can see there are research in fundamental sciences, for example, the omics technologies, and also technology development, for example, the lighting effects and the new soil technology. And there is one more that is not included here, which is ecological studies, which to me is also very, very interesting. So you can check out Prof. Sanjay's website if you want to find out more about that. I have put out the link in the chat box and also Facebook Live comment section there. So the first question comes from Dr. Nanik from Faculty of Science and Technology from Universitas Airlangga in Indonesia. So the question is, Dr. Nanik said, our group is working on a similar research to you, though on a smaller scale. So is there any possibility for us to have a joint research project, for example, to send our young researcher to your lab?
So our co-host, Dr. Firdaus, can answer that. He's a living example of that. He has come from UTM as a visitor. He's a visiting scientist, and we are hosting him. It's been 2 years plus, or 2 years?
Almost 2 years.
Almost 2 years. And then being in Malaysia, he can go back and forth, and he can manage some of his host universities' work, as well as pick up some of these technologies, and then eventually bring it back to value add both to his research, his colleagues, and to science in this country. So definitely there are ways you can think about short term or long term. This is a long term, but there are other formats available. But minimal, I would say, to make any of these collaborations or visiting stints meaningful would be about 6 months, right? So having some sort of a leave of 6 months or more depends on how you structure it. You can also contact Firdaus on if it's a Malaysia-specific option, what kind of his experiences were.
Yeah. So you can check out Prof. Sanjay's website to get his contact, especially his email. So feel free to drop me an email, and you can also email me at an address that I will share with you later. So the second question is from Joyce. He said hi to you. She said hi to you, and then this is a bit technical question. Does your SYNCOM are your SYNCOM seeing significant improvement on the vegetables you are testing? Since your vegetables is a leafy type, how about those that bear yield, such as cabbage, chili, etc.? And do you see those yield correlated with growth?
Yeah, so I mentioned two outcomes of our SYNCOMs, right? One is for growth and yield. That's basically because that's the bottom line currently for the farmers. They sell it by the kilo, right? So that is one outcome of the SYNCOMs, and I showed some of the SYNCOM results, the photographs of the difference. We also have ways in which we are improving the nutritional quality. That is the second value addition. Third value addition is we are working towards aromas and volatiles. That's the organoleptic profile. And so this we are doing by understanding above and below ground relationships of microbes and other types of nutrients that we can provide. So management practices, microbes, the host genetics, these come together, right?
Yeah, and some questions sent directly to me. What is the adoption status of microbiome and omics assisted approach in the field?
This is rather early, and it's not easy to put these elements together in one roof, in one umbrella, in one team. It's taken us several decades to bring this together, and facilities. We struggled to put these facilities together, and then slowly we could get funding. Then other people joined and expertise. So it takes a while to put this together. One way is that if chemistries, analytical chemists in your institution, and genomics, bioinformatics people in your institution, and biologists, plant biologists, microbiologists in your institution, if you all come together with your resources, that's one way to put such a program together. The other way is, of course, through collaboration. We work with providing protocols and things to get your extracts, grow it in the way you are doing, and then come with your extracts and then work with our team to do this. So in the past, we have had some young researchers bringing their samples, and they stayed for X number of months, and then they could. We also train them in the computational work needed, and so this is how a few different formats will be possible. I would say in the beginning, collaboration would help. In the long run, it would be good to set up the facility either within or between your local universities. Yeah. We can help in any training that would be needed.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, the next question is quite interesting. Do you have any recommendations to Malaysia in terms of strategies for improving our food production towards better food security?
So this is a complicated answer. Why? Because agriculture, I'm putting on my hat of my agriculture and farming background. I'm the third generation farmer, and my father became a scientist, became a breeder, and I'm doing the same thing. And looking back at the countries and how agriculture happens, there are different agroclimatic zones, right? And then you have your native plant types. And Then you have the consumer demands. So by looking at these is how agricultural zones, and of course in each zone there are different resources that are available. So I have had the opportunity to look at the Sarawak situation a bit more closely, and I'm working with some company in near KL. Sime Darby is one such company. So with them, the conditions are quite different in different parts. So one is to understand these agroclimatic zoning resources available and how those resources are being made available for agricultural production. A lot of these farms, they can produce a lot, but because of certain bottlenecks, and that needs to be studied by looking at soil biogeography of these areas, the climate weather patterns, and a lot of that information already exists. And so from understanding the agricultural practices, we can then start looking at it in a very holistic manner, and then seeing how the value added technologies can be fitting into different places. I know in Malaysia, Cameron is very heavily, intensely, farmed. So how long term is it? What is the health of soil? Can we predict and model the future based on the current? So those are some of the issues that we can think about going forward, looking at the natural way of enhancing, and secondly, looking at intensive farming, how to make it more sustainable.
Yeah, those are very good strategies. I think this is the probably the last question, but quite a long one. So while Singapore is lucky to have plenty of funding in research in mitigating climate change with modern agricultural technologies, how does the less developed and poorer countries fare? And how can Singapore play a role in helping the less developed countries?
So yeah, so that's an interesting question. So Singapore only recently got into forming agriculture as one of the pillars of its economy. This was not there even beyond 5 years back, right? For the 20, if you look from minus 25 from now till minus 20 years from now, this was not, until minus 5 years from now, this thrust was not there. Why? Because Singapore, and we know that even this is information we all know, majority of the food in Singapore is imported. And so the more we think about trying to become self-sufficient, how much of it can be done internally, you have to put in some funds, build an ecosystem. So the government agencies, if you go to Singapore Food Agency website, you will see their strategies. They're making food baskets and identifying ways. Also, some new strategies are coming up on cultured food and so on and so forth. So these types of strategies are very recent. Now it will take another 5 to 10 years before these will become mainstream adopted by the industry, by the producers, right? So it's a big period. In the meantime, what is important is these partnerships from science and other stakeholders have to go beyond the boundaries of Singapore. And this is one of the visions of Singapore R&D manifesto, that if we are able to address some of these challenges, it will help us leverage into forming new relationships, new partnerships and collaborations, both by scientific institutions and commercial institutions. And that's how this flow will happen, because, and with that goodwill, then our food supply is what we we build together, grow together, then the supply chains, both between two countries or in the regional scale, it will become a bit more resilient because we would be relying on each other for this production. So this inter-reliance is a key, I think, and I keep talking about it, to food security. So we should not, as scientists, if most of the people, I don't know the composition, but if most of us are in science or tech or policy, this kind of collaboration actually is the foundation for partnerships and food production so that de-risking happens, giving rise to security, right? So don't underestimate what scientific collaborations can spur.
Yeah. Okay. I hope you got some ideas, inspirations from Prof. Sanjay's talk just now. And thank you, Prof. Sanjay, for the sharing. I initially thought it was impossible to get him to sit down with us for more than 1 hour to share his thoughts, but we are actually lucky to get his timetable for this particular slot is free. So to all our audience, if you have not filled in the link to the registration form to get your TPD and e-certificates, please do so. I put up the link in the chat box and also Facebook live comment. I guess that's all that we have for you this afternoon. Thank you all for coming to this OGC. Just a quick reminder that there will be a few more OGCs this week. Check out the Faculty of Science Facebook page. I think we have 1 or 2 on the 9th and on the 10th. So, so to end the session, I would like to thank you again for joining us. Stay safe and goodbye.